Persyaratan Sederhana Syaratan Imperial sempena dengan sidang ekonomi kementerian kebangsaan yang dianjurkan bersama oleh asli dan juga bernama. Dan ketika ini kita akan terus saja bersama dengan Yang Amat Berhormat Perdana Menteri bagi menyingkap sedikit tentang senario ekonomi setempat dan bagaimana ia akan memainkan peranan penting dalam mencipta hala tuju dan juga perancangan ekonomi ke arah menjadikan Malaysia sebuah negara berpendapatan tinggi pada tahun 2020. Kita ikuti ucap pertama Yang Amat Berhormat Datuk Seri Najib Najib Razak, Perdana Menteri Malaysia.
We are doing too much in terms of reform and too fast. That is why I wanted to take this opportunity to speak not only to this audience but through this platform to the rakyat. Today I will explain the challenge or challenges facing our nation, particularly why, as government, we have to act and what we're doing to help. And I will show how we are, in fact, building a stronger and more prosperous Malaysia. Ladies and gentlemen, since independence, economic development has brought better jobs and better prospects for the Malaysian people. We are healthier, I hope so, definitely better educated, and better off than ever before. This has been achieved thanks to hard work by the rakyat, the entrepreneurial skills of the rakyat, the commitment by the rakyat, and careful planning, plus effective delivery by the government. Throughout history, the government has guided the nation's growth with strategic plans to keep the economy on track. This approach has been successful. Over the past 30 years, overall poverty has fallen by 97%. We have ended extreme poverty. Life expectancy has increased by 7 years. Average schooling up by 5 years. Since 1992, household income has tripled. We have made a real difference to the prospects for the ordinary Malaysian and to the lives of the poorest in our society. But progress comes with a price. For decades, the government subsidy bill has been rising. In 2010, we spent 15% of our budget on subsidies and incentives. By 2012, that has reached 21.4% or 44 billion ringgit. As market prices have increased, the cost of subsidies has risen exponentially, and many of the subsidies are blanket subsidies, which means everyone received them, including foreigners, businesses, and billionaires. And they are not equitable. For example, with petrol subsidies, the bigger the car, the more you benefit. That meant money that could have been spent on productive investment, such as building more schools, training more of our young people, providing better access to health, was being used to pay for cheaper fuel. And the costs are adding up. In 2009, our budget deficit the gap between what we earn and what we spend was 6%. The cost of subsidies was one of the factors driving up our deficit. A budget deficit by itself is not always a bad thing. Malaysia has been in deficit since the late 1990s, and it has not stopped us from developing. And many successful countries, developed countries, have much higher debts, as you know. But there are times when debt and deficit can be very dangerous. As we know from the 1997 crisis, things can change. And when they can change very fast. If the global economy is not doing well, people will think twice about investing in nations whose deficits are too large. Even our local investors will be deterred. Markets think a country which cannot pay its debts, they will charge a much higher interest rate. Worse still, if sentiment turns against a country, it can trigger capital flight. And in today's interconnected world, that can happen in the blink of an eye. When that happens, the results can be devastating. In a recent financial crisis, some European countries had their credit ratings slashed, borrowing costs soared, and debts spiraled out of control, scaring off investors and putting currencies under pressure. And it was the people who suffered the most. They lost their jobs. In some European countries, 1 in 3 people are unemployed. They lost the safety net as governments were made to cut funding for public welfare, even for pensions in some countries. And they lost their independence, and they were forced to give up control over their economic destiny to the IMF. Ladies and gentlemen, as Prime Minister, my ultimate responsibility is to protect the people of Malaysia. I will never allow our nation's progress. I will never allow the well-being of our people, and I will never allow the sovereignty of Malaysia to come under threat. That is why this government has acted to keep our finances under control. 4 years ago, we began to reform subsidies, reducing payments for sugar and fuel. And we use the savings not only to reduce our deficit, but also to open new One Malaysia clinics, create more scholarships for our students. By moving from blanket to targeted subsidies, we freed up money to spend on public health education and infrastructure for both urban and rural areas. Infrastructure spending that are very much needed. Tan Sri Jeffrey Cha wants the MRT to pass through Sunway Lagoon. People in Sabah Sarawak want the Pan-Borneo Highway to be constructed. Even in Kelantan, they want new highways to be constructed. However, the cost of subsidies kept rising, and it became clear that Malaysia's economic position was becoming unsustainable. Investors, banks, and rating agencies began focusing on Malaysia's debt and deficit, and in particular our subsidy bill. And one rating agency, in fact, had given us an early warning, a precursor to a possible downgrade if things are not attended to. It is tempting to say we don't need to worry about some foreign analysts think. We should just focus on supporting the rakyat. But this misses a critical point. Like other countries, we need investment to prosper. We need the markets to have confidence in Malaysia. Foreign and domestic investment helps Malaysian businesses to grow, creates Malaysian jobs, and develops Malaysia's economy. It helped build Kuala Lumpur's skyline, Iskandar waterfront, Kuantan's industrial park, etc., etc. It helped build railways, highways that move us around the country. And investment created thousands of jobs, and in particular, more well-paid jobs, as international firms set up factories, offices, and headquarters in Malaysia. Foreign investment and domestic investment are vital. We must ensure we keep Malaysia attractive for both. Like other countries, we also borrow money to pay for things, like new roads or hospitals. We finance this spending by selling government bonds, a promise that we will pay in future. And like other countries, we must act to strengthen our finances, because investment and borrowing both depend on one thing, that is confidence. The people who invest in Malaysia, the people who buy our bonds, must have confidence that Malaysia is a country which can pay its bills. That means showing that we can take the difficult decisions needed to bring debt and spending down and increase our income. And that is why in September last year, we announced further steps to reform the subsidy program and introduce a GST, not at once, but as part of a phased program that is in stages to strengthen our national finances. The GST is a 6% tax on goods and services, which, contrary to what some say, will replace the existing service and sales tax, not add to it. Many goods and services will be covered under GST, but many will be exempt or zero-rated, including basic foods like rice, flour, cooking oil, and essential services like household water, supplies, and public transport. Out of 193 countries in the world, 160 have some form of GST or VAT. I keep on saying 160 countries cannot be wrong. We need this new and equitable, more equitable tax, because only 1 in 10 Malaysians pay income tax. Most of the people in this room pay income tax, I hope. But only 1 in 10 of all Malaysians pay tax. If our economy is to grow, and to grow strongly, we need to not only cut unproductive spending, but also to broaden our tax base, our revenue stream, allowing us to invest in the future. GST will enable us to increase our development spending, because I believe our development spending should be increased in the future. Instead of subsidies, we will spend more money on productive investment, on infrastructure, on schools, on healthcare, even fighting crime, which requires more money at the end of the day. Ladies and gentlemen, I did not take the decision to reduce subsidies or to introduce the GST lightly. I thought long and hard about the risks. And I know the saying, it gets very lonely at the top, and the possible impact on the rakyat. But I judged that we had to act. We had to act in order to guarantee our future, our security, our independence, and our growth, which must be sustainable. Malaysia is on a journey. The destination is clear, crystal clear. High-income nation advanced economy status. Just like any journey, there may be some bumps along the way. Like if you travel by plane, you might encounter some air pockets along the way. But we may need to adjust our course to avoid roadblocks. But the important thing is our destination remains the same. When the government approved the subsidy programs or reforms, we did so on the back of strong recommendations from Treasury, from the Central Bank, Bank Negara, the Economic Planning Unit. And we did so with our eyes firmly on our destination. Governing is about taking decisions which are right for tomorrow, not just for today. Failure to act now would be irresponsible. As a politician, it would be easy to make cheap promises, offer people whatever they want, and deal with the consequences later. But, ladies and gentlemen, leadership is about doing what is right, not what is easy or expedient. If we duct the decisions now, our development will suffer. I am prepared to put the nation's long-term interests before my own short-term popularity. And I am confident that the reforms will work because our economic record speaks for itself. In turbulent years, the government has kept our economy safe and strong. When I took office, the world was in the middle of a deep financial crisis. Many countries were on the brink of a disaster, yet our economy continued to grow. Since 2009, our GDP grew by an average of 5.7% per year, and household income is 24% higher. The latest subsidy reforms have already been welcomed by investors and rating agencies. Our budget deficit is falling. It is now 3.9%. We promised 4%, we achieved 3.9%. We are on the way to a balanced budget by 2020. And despite what some pundits say, Malaysia's economy continues to grow. GDP was up 5.1% in the last quarter, more than expected. Retail sales, construction, trade, and exports are all rising. Last year saw record trade, the highest in our history, and record private investment, as announced by Datuk Seri Mustafa Mohamad, which grows Malaysian businesses, including small and medium-sized companies that employ millions of Malaysians. This growth and this investment brings better jobs and new opportunities. Behind the big numbers, things are getting better for Malaysian households too. Average wages continue to rise. Last year, salaries grew on average by 6%, much more than inflation, which was at 2.1%. Ladies and gentlemen, for many Malaysians, things are getting better. But I know it does not always feel that way. I understand that talk of GDP growth and economic trends can seem irrelevant when households are trying to make ends meet. So let me conclude by explaining what we're doing to help. First, the government continues to help Malaysians with the cost of living. This year alone, we'll spend more than 40 billion ringgit on food, fuel, and education subsidies, and on support for lower income households. But by switching from blanket subsidies to more targeted support, we are getting better value for money. This year, increased BRIM payments reached some 7 million Malaysians, including for the first time who's earning between 3,000 ringgit and 4,000 ringgit per month. BRIM is fair and progressive. It is given on a basis of need alone, and it is working. And in the future, we can see how BRIM can be implemented more effectively. We have some ideas in this regard. Over the next 5 years, we will increase BRIM to 1,200 ringgit per year to help cushion the blow of rising living costs. We are introducing new measures like financing up to 3,000 ringgit for new low-cost houses built under My Home scheme to help more Malaysians move into safe, modern homes and increasing the supply of affordable homes. We have opened One Malaysia shops to help with the cost of basic goods and One Malaysia clinics to help make healthcare more affordable. And we have introduced a minimum wage to protect low earners and guarantee a basic standard of living. We are also helping middle-income households with a 1% tax reduction and a special 2,000 ringgit tax exemption for those earning up to 8,000 ringgit a month. And we are working with employers to make sure they play their part. Malaysian workers take home about a third of our GDP as wages. In advanced economies, the figure is closer to half. The people and the government are investing in Malaysia's future. Companies must take steps and make contribution too by ensuring the pay gap between executive and boardroom and the factory floor does not rise, but can be reduced. The gap can be reduced progressively over time. And as more Malaysians pursue higher education, we have begun a series of intensive projects to help graduates to get their careers started. Over their lifetimes, graduates will likely to earn more than non-graduates, but it can be difficult to match skills to needs, especially the business sector. So we're working on programs such as Scheme Latihan Satu Malaysia and Say One Malaysia to upskill our graduates and prepare them to enter to the workplace. We are also focusing on making government more efficient. The Chief Secretary is acting on the 2012 Auditor Report, Ketua Audit Report, and announcements have been made from time to time on specific actions taken. It's wrong to say we've not acted on the 2012 Ketua Audit Report. Government electricity use, we are cutting down by 5%. Transport costs, and even entertainment allowances for ministers. We are improving overall efficiency through the Government Transformation Program. We are ramping up the fight against corruption. Corruption is an age-old problem, and combating it is one of my priorities. If we are to succeed as a nation in this endeavor, we must work together across the political divide to make corruption socially unacceptable. In government, for example, procurement is now basically through open tender and competitive biddings. Corruption must be dealt with at all levels, not just focusing on big fish, but also low-level corruption, which all of us face on a daily basis. Some claim that we could somehow stop corruption overnight, and therefore we would not need subsidy reform or the GST. But that's wrong. First of all, to be honest, we cannot click our fingers and make corruption disappear in a day, a month, or a year. And so we must tackle corruption, reform subsidies, and introduce GST to make the budget balance. Take Hong Kong, for example. In the 1970s, it was plagued by corruption. Today, it's one of the least corrupt cities in the world. But this success was won over decades. Yes, we must tackle corruption, and yes, must reform our finances. Unless we act on both fronts, our economy will weaken, and investors and lenders will think twice about investing in Malaysia. We are also tackling rising prices. The measures we have taken are already starting to bear fruit. We have established a cabinet committee under the DPM to tackle problem of rising costs, and we're keeping a close eye on markets for any attempts at price gouging. If we see prices rising more than they should, we will not hesitate to step in and protect Malaysian consumers. The Malaysian Competition Commission will continue to protect the competition process for the benefit of businesses, consumers, and the economy. We are also preparing our workforce to thrive in new industries. The government's economic transformation program is not just about numbers. It's about creating new kinds of jobs and preparing Malaysians to seize new opportunities that will arise. 60 years ago, people worked mainly in the fields. 30 years ago, in factories. Today, many work in offices. We must be prepared for the next shift, the jobs of the future, the jobs that today do not exist yet, the jobs that our children will have need investment and skills. Take the story of Kabila Hussein, a seaweed farmer from Sabah, which is part of MCMC's advert, if you like. A few years ago, she was struggling to make enough money to survive. But by taking her business online, she now employs half her village and sells to countries around the world. I want more people like Kabila to be able to take advantage of new opportunities. That is what the economic transformation program is all about. Ladies and gentlemen, I know people are worried about rising prices. We have always said that prices will rise when subsidy reform takes place. But it's important to remember why. If our debts and deficits were allowed to grow unchecked, Malaysia's economy would have been at risk, affecting the lives and incomes of millions. And we have taken a calculated decision to act, because to do nothing would be irresponsible. Since independence, we have achieved great things, but we cannot take success for granted. Economic conditions can change overnight. We must be prepared. We must make savings today so that we are stronger tomorrow. And we should do so on our terms. As the Malay proverb says, sediakan payung sebelum hujan. The subsidy reforms are part of a carefully formed and long-standing plan to make our economy fairer, stronger, more stable and sustainable. That means people will continue investing in Malaysian businesses and creating Malaysian jobs. It means Malaysia's extraordinary development will continue, with more opportunities for our children and a better standard of living for all. And the plan is working. We are listening to people's concerns. We will make adjustments to our policies when they are needed. Just like driving on a highway, if you find traffic in one lane, you shift gears and change lanes, but your destination remains the same. You do not make a U-turn. And I thank you for your support. Tan Sri Michael, you alluded to the silent majority supporting the government, but please don't be too silent. We need to hear your voices loud and clear at times. Ladies and gentlemen, our destination remains the same. We are on the brink of a developed nation status. If we commit together, we can build a stronger economy for Malaysia. When that happens, the rewards will be great. By moving from blanket subsidies to targeted support, we are helping those who need it most. By strengthening our economy, we are ensuring our country stays on track to reach high income status. By getting our finances under control, we are investing in the future of our families, our communities, and our nation. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.